This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this Honourable Chamber was debating the Pesticides Control Amendment Bill 2020. To that, we shall reserve. Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise, of course, to support this Pesticide Control Amendment Bill. And as you would appreciate, sir, it has direct bearing on that which I am chosen and tasked and privileged to do every single day. As I was listening to the Honourable Member present the bill, sir, I reflected on the fact that for all of us alive in this particular generation, we're realizing that across the world, in many places, our overall population is increasing, though not necessarily the case in Barbados. And with the increase in population, it will tend to demand greater use of the land. You combine that population increase, you look at urbanization. The idea would be eventually that agricultural land would diminish across the world. This government, sir, is committing to putting more land into agriculture. It's an interesting thing. Ultimately, sir, the reality is that pesticides became a major component of the way we dealt with agriculture over years. And for obvious reasons, persons introduced pesticides to be able to control pests. And that is the primary reason that these pesticides were introduced. But Newton's third law of motion tells us when a force acts on a body, an equal and opposite force will act on some other body, or as known normally, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And for those of us, sir, who have responsibility for the ocean and for the environment, as my honourable friend who spoke before me so eloquently, we realize that there are things that we know must do to make sure that we take care of the space that we occupy. I was remarking to the Honourable Member for St. James Central as we were leaving this place before lunch, that this generation, in fact, the people who are alive today, not even necessarily this generation, those who are older than myself, people in my age range, those who are coming, this moment in time is a defining moment for all of us. And that the choices we make over the next few years, the choices we make over the next year or 2 years, and certainly the choices we make over the next decade will determine the way people would live, the quality of life for everyone, for those who come after us. It is an enormous responsibility, sir. So when we bring a bill to amend the pesticides that are being used in agriculture or affecting the soil or affecting the marine space, we do so cognizant of the fact that we are carrying a burden in a way, sir, not only for this generation, but indeed for future generations. And that is the context within which I feel we need to see these bills. Initial reports would suggest, sir, that a third of crops across the world use pesticides. And there are still pests. And people would feel that the response, obviously, then would be to use more pesticides. And I am suggesting that, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central spoke earlier, that we need to have more pesticides, yes, but a different kind of pesticide, a more organic base, sir. But worldwide pesticide usage is around 5 million tons per year, with a value of US $26 billion. This is big business. Pesticides are big business. And for those who produce pesticides, of course, they're going to challenge it. But I think when we look at the cost of what is costing the world, what is costing Barbados, what is costing just people who live here, now is the time for us to make some serious changes, sir. We must look at more refined use of agrochemicals, using biological and cultural strategies, sir. But the difference between this pollutant, because pesticides are a pollutant at the end of the day, after they've killed the pests, sir, if they do, they linger in the environment, sir, as a pollutant. The difference between this particular pollutant and other pollutants is that we introduce it deliberately. We use this deliberately. It is controlled by man. It is not like a byproduct. It is what we are doing deliberately, sir. And therefore, we can control it. And these pesticides kill a range of things. They kill, you look at a bottle, if you go to buy, I went this weekend, sir, because I started seeing some centipedes around the house. You know how that goes. Madam panics. You look at the bottle, Mr. Speaker, sir, you see these things will kill centipedes, roaches, flying insects, unimagined insects, all kind of things, everything in between. These pesticides are so vague and vast in the things that they would kill. I'm pretty sure including humans. It is a serious thing. And the fact is that we hadn't paid enough attention to these things in the past. I commend the Honourable Member for St. Philip South for the bill that he is bringing. But if you look at the dangers, sir, in the chemicals themselves, and you combine that with irresponsible usage, which is the case sometimes, you are talking about an accident waiting to happen. In fact, sir, I believe that the world is now reaping that which we sowed in many ways. And we have now to be very, very careful, sir. The misuse of these agrochemicals can put many species at risk. Many species in the marine environment, on the terrestrial space, and its improper use, sir, has a direct threat on health. And I heard the Honourable Leader of the Opposition make his remarks, sir, about the direct threat on health, sir, and it's something that you have to take seriously. And I believe this amendment bill allows us to do so. I also recall, sir, last year I was having a conversation with another minister in one of the islands. And he told me that the country was looking at going into marijuana production. And persons came in from Canada, and when they came to the island, this particular island, and they studied the soil, the results of the studies of the soil said that there was no way they could grow the marijuana in these areas. None of the areas that formerly grew sugarcane at the time, because of the concentration of the chemicals in the soil. And I fear that if it is not good enough for marijuana, then I don't know how it could be good enough for us to be growing vegetables and fruit and offering these things to people as healthy options when the soil from whence it came, sir, is polluted. And therefore, it is one of these things that I believe that we know must look at a lot more seriously. And we must guard against it, sir, and we must act very quickly too. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, because I'm going to talk about the marine space, I had the opportunity to walk along Carlisle Bay. I wasn't just chilling. I don't get to do that these days. I walked along Carlisle Bay with a gentleman, sir, who is an environmentalist. And together we walked and we were looking to collect what forms of life, or note. We made a notation of the forms of life we saw. We were trying to make a note of the fish that you could see on the near shore, because you know when you go to the beach, sometimes you see fish at the near shore. As a boy going to Pebbles or going to Browns Beach, you used to see bare fish. I mean, bare fish ain't really a good word for it, but a lot of fish. And we were looking to see if we would see cockles, fish, crabs, birds, because the birds would eat the worms in the near shore and the sand. You know, sometimes you see the birds. What we saw 2 crabs, very small little crabs, and that whole time we were there up and down for about an hour and a half. And a lot of garbage, all kinds of garbage. So now the sea is being used, sir, by people who go there as a dumping ground. But more bothering and more troublesome to me as we walked along that area is that we saw about 4 or 5 major areas for water runoff. So that the water that comes off of the countryside, or wherever it comes from, sir, comes down through the city, through my constituency, sometimes to yours, definitely down through the constituency of the city, represented by the Minister of Health, and through my next door neighbor and the representative for St. Michael South Central. But these huge areas where the water runs off, if you go to the beach, you'll see where the water runs off, a whole set of moss and sediment and all kinds of sediment just there. Whatever comes off of the land, all of the pollution, runs then, sir, straight into the sea. And 2 things bother me about it, but more than 2, but 2 I'll mention. The first is the ferocity with which it comes, because we haven't found a way yet to properly slow down the water as it comes, or to capture the water so that we don't get so much wasted into the sea anyhow. And then the second that bothers me is whatever is in the water. The way that it works is that the water comes down, and as you know, it picks up everything that comes with it. So we're talking about the pollutants, sir, that are in the water from the farms and so on, but it's picking up diesel from the cars, because, you know, people still leave diesel cars all over and that is something we really have to address still, because in my constituency, there's still areas where you see a lot of old cars and the diesel underneath the cars and that pollutes the water source as it runs into the sea. But we really need to look at that, sir. We need to talk about an integrated coastal zone management plan. And as we look at the entirety of the thing, looking at the watershed management, the way we capture the water, and so on and so forth. But it was just very interesting to see that as we walked along there, you could hardly see fish, hardly see crab. The guy referred to it as the Dead Sea. I wouldn't go that far. But I also know, sir, that COVID has taught us across the world that where human activity ceased, or where human activity was restrained, we saw the natural environment healing itself. So I know that if we properly control some of these areas and some of these things that we do, the natural environment can heal itself. And that what we're facing, sir, is not some inevitable gloom and doom scenario, but that human beings can control the outcome that we're facing. This bill, sir, must be also seen in that context. And you have to understand, sir, the path, what I call the path of pesticides. So the chemicals are sprayed on the land. Water molecules via the rain, the watering or the ground system, flow almost like vehicles that transport from the land into the water all these chemicals, sir, into the ocean. That's the way it flows now. I'm moving along, sir, with the ferocity that I mentioned, sir, and a whole lot of destruction. I listened, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, who raised some very interesting points, and about the idea of what is happening in the marine space. Pesticides, sir, uncontrolled pesticides, pose the greatest threat from both groundwater runoff, discharge, and from stormwater runoff. It would, sir, because if you have the wanton use of pesticides across Barbados, and as I explained, that is why I explained it first, sir, the runoff into the ocean, you could understand that with that amount of pesticides, it would obviously pose some threat. But interestingly enough, a study was done, because there are periodic studies done, the Ministry of Environment checks the water quality all the time. And there are very few cases where our water quality has pesticides and different things above the accepted level. Very few. So there is always monitoring of the ocean space. Very few incidents where there's anything for Barbadians to be particularly alarmed about. But I feel, sir, that in this context, we now must test differently and test further. So that we now must also test the fish, sir, and the nearshore, and the vegetation. Because oftentimes what occurs is that as these things ingest the chemicals, while they may not stay in the water because of the way the water moves and ebbs and flows, the fish and the vegetation, sir, may have the chemicals in them. And we have to be able to test for those in Barbados. In fact, in Barbados, I find that we now have to be able to test for a lot of things. Because even for me, and I'm sure for the Minister of Agriculture and Environment, we often have to send, and the Minister of Health perhaps, we often have to send overseas for results for tests that we need to be doing in Barbados. And it is a very costly exercise. I have, sir, been trying to get results on some plastics that I sent away now for months. Unfortunately, the lab that we used, the persons in there came down with COVID. And so, sir, we now must wait. But I think Barbados has to get to the point where it can test for some of these things. But we know, sir, that the pesticides would kill larvae. It would kill juvenile fish. And it bioaccumulates in some plants and so on. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to. But I give the assurance, sir, that when we test, sir, we do not normally find anything necessarily for Barbadians to feel panicked about. But nonetheless, we also know that the quality of our nearshore, as reflected in the life, is still not the same. We also have seen, sir, the situation with our corals definitely not being the same. And so we need to do more testing, and we also need to do a different kind of testing. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, what does that have to do for me and in terms of the ocean and the blue economy? I feel, sir, that this world is, in a way, a house for all of us to live in. And yesterday, during our discussion with the heads of meetings, sir, we looked at the blue economy as a house. And the foundation of that house must be a healthy ocean. It must be whether it's the coastal zone or the exclusive economic zone, we're talking about a healthy ocean as the foundation of the house, sir. And that everything that we do, all the pillars in this house, sir, must reflect our interest in taking care of that ocean space. And that we must treat to it sustainably. So in our house, sir, none of us, sir, and none of us would do deliberately things to damage our house. But unfortunately, I mean, if you look at the chemicals that you are using, sir, maybe, I don't know. But if you look, I know for sure when I look at the chemicals that I'm using to clean the house, some of these chemicals too, sir, are also fairly dangerous. And there's a move now for people to be using a lot more organic materials in terms of cleaning their houses, going back. I joke, but I take it very seriously that in a way, what is required of us in this generation is to go back to the future. For us to get to the future, we really got to go back and do the things that our forefathers used to do, our foreparents used to do, things that we discarded. I heard the Honourable Minister of Environment speak today and the Honourable Minister of Agriculture about using old remedies to be able to treat to some of these issues. And people who had scoffed at these things, because it is the way of the educated oftentimes to scoff at the formerly uneducated, not recognizing that the real knowledge often lies with those who never went to a university in their life. Because they know they went to the university, they never went to university in life, but they went to the University of Life. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, they often understand how to treat to these things. So when the Minister of Environment speaks about it, sir, as Minister of Environment, I hope we take it seriously. And when the Minister of Agriculture does so, I also hope that we take it seriously. But, sir, we have to look at maritime and marine transport. Again, sir, during COVID, there were areas where large ships would traverse that had not seen any kind of life in years. People assumed all that life was dead. And once the ships were not traveling anymore, sir, we saw life return, which tells me the ocean space can heal itself. But it also tells me, because we also have to be practical. I mean, we have to be able to move people. We have to be able to eat from the sea. We have to be able to do these things. But we have to be able to do so in a sustainable way. And that is why I feel like going green and green energy is going to be very important as we go forward. The kind of materials that we use to fuel our ships, sir. The Barbados is now in the process, sir, of changing its legislation. And the port of Bridgetown, sir, is already in the process of changing the way it does business, sir, to be able to become the world's largest green maritime hub and to put us ahead of the curve, sir, so that our legislation would reflect, sir, our desire to move toward the 2030 objectives that we set for ourselves, to be fossil fuel free by a certain time in our existence, or at least carbon neutral. But all of these things, sir, are tied in. And the question was raised this morning if there's consultation between us. Of course, there's consultation between us. We talk a lot about on a lot of these things. We just had a meeting, sir. We're looking at collectively at how we're going to respond to the situation in Graham Hall. The Minister of Agriculture and I had a meeting, sir. We're looking at how does Barbados position itself to best be able to export to the EU. The Minister of Environment and I having a conversation. Very recently, we were discussing the invasive lionfish and what we can do collectively. So, of course, there is conversation, there's consultation, sir. And also on the turtle. So there are a number of areas where we collaborate. But I also feel, because collaboration must not be confused for any kind of overlap, which was the hint given. What we experienced in the government, sir, is that in the last few years, if you look at almost any ministry, the amount of rot, decay that happened, whether physically, figuratively or not, is so tremendous that I cannot imagine, to be honest with you. I cannot imagine, and I imagine that it may happen eventually, but I cannot imagine, sir, that any person could say to themselves that we don't have work to do every single day. When you look at the markets, the state of the markets, it would freak you out. And that we are working every day to bring the markets into some proper state. When you look at where we were in shipping, sir, so far behind. So far behind. The reason is because people feel you need to have the minister of this and this and this and this. You put a minister responsible for 20 things, can't get down to do, as the Prime Minister says, to roll up his sleeves and does the work. So that shipping tied on to tourism never got attention in this country. And that is why we failed, sir, the audit from the IMO in such a terrible way. We won't fail it again, though. But if you look at it, sir, the same thing happened with agriculture. You had agriculture and fisheries. Fisheries felt in many cases that they were the outside child, never getting the full attention that they got, sir. And that is why, sir, in the very near future, you're going to see us bringing some things in here, as we did recently, sir, but to continue to transform that space. But a lot of this work is necessary work. Under the visionary leadership of the Honourable Leader of this country, the representative for St. Michael Northeast. But Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel like when I think about this blue space, sir, and the fact that we created it, sir, as a house with pillars, a foundation, pillars looking at sustainable marine transport, sustainable fisheries as we go forward, sir, the healthy oceans, our own health, biotechnology as well, and then coastal development and how we build out on the coast, sir. All very important, but all tied to this. Because the conversation, it must never be felt that we came here simply to do a pesticide amendment bill that is not tied to something larger. And that the government has been very steadfast, sir, in its vision and the trajectory that we've set for ourselves. So that everything that we do, sir, nothing here is happenstance, but a sound system, sir, rooted in a vision, sir, that Barbados must become, by 2030, fossil fuel free, sir, or carbon neutral, sir. But beyond that, sir, because lives matter and people matter, sir, and that, you know, at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, sir, for all that we do and all the good that I believe this government has done, one of the things that we must also do, sir, is advocate on the international stage for change. Sir, the Honourable Member for St. James South knows exactly what I'm talking about. Because when you go to these international meetings, first of all, we couldn't ban enough plastics to stop the sea from rising in Barbados. We cannot ban enough pesticides, sir, to affect the quality overall of the ocean space. We're just too small. But unless we do these things, sir, so that we can go on the international scene, sir, and tell the people, look at what this small country is doing, sir. Moral-driven leadership, sir. Driven by an idea, sir, that the earth, the world is bigger than ourselves. We have to go, sir, and to say, look, these are the things we've done. And to make a case for Barbados, sir, you could guarantee almost every year somebody in the region being affected by a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane, sir. So we are doing our bit, sir. You tie this to what is happening in the environment. You tie it to what is happening in agriculture. You tie it to what is happening in energy. Tie it to what is happening in the maritime affairs and blue economy, so that there is a collective, sir. And that we combine our collective intelligence and our collective efforts, sir, to righting a wrong. And this is how this bill fits in, sir, to the overall scheme of things. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I felt as well before I close, I don't intend to be long. When I said I'd go on for a little bit, but I don't intend to be long. Mr. Speaker, sir, I feel as if, sir, when we consider what we've done, sir, to ban plastics, I also feel that we need to go further. And that there are microbeads, sir, in a lot of the things that we use, sir. A lot of the cosmetics, in the shampoos, in the detergent. So these little microbeads, sir, that stay on forever and ever, amen. But they're consumed by the fish. They're consumed by the turtles. They're affecting the corals, sir. I tell my staff all the time as well, sir, we need to have a conversation daily now with Barbadians, so that they could understand what it is that we are doing and why we're doing it, sir. We only got one Barbados, though. Ain't like we got 2 or 3, you know what I mean, so? We got one Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. And... Sorry, sir. It slipped out. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we only have one Barbados, and we must do all that we must, sir, to be able to protect it. I went the other day, I saw, you know, I used to see it, and I used to think that's so glorious. I saw somebody release a whole set of balloons the other day over the sea at a celebration. You know how they Lego the balloons, and it's really pretty? Man, that hurt me to the core. Because what happens when those balloons are released as cute, you enjoy a moment, you get to celebrate for 2 minutes and take pictures, and then these balloons, these plastic things, stay in the air for a bit, but then they end right back up in the sea. Sir, I believe the time has got to come where we look at these balloons too. And we really have to start thinking seriously about how we manage some of this space. So we got to find alternative solutions to the chemicals, as the Honourable Minister is doing. But if we got to find alternative solutions to how we celebrate, the things that we eat from, the things that we eat, all together, sir, I just feel like the time has come for us to start thinking about things differently. I am forever indebted. You know, like you, I keep telling him, Mr. Speaker, I'm a social scientist, and the Honourable Member for St. Michael, South Central, she's an economist and a social scientist. But I am thankful to the Prime Minister, sir, for giving me this opportunity to serve in the blue economy. No matter what happened to me for the rest of my life, it could never be the same. I can never be the same. Yeah. Well, none of us would be the same. But the ministries that we get. I mean, you have to start, it makes you think differently about the world, sir. And when I think about what we're doing, sir, I think about the other things. And I wish the Honourable Member, when he wraps up, sir, would talk about some of the other things we're doing. I mean, I've heard the Honourable Minister of Agriculture speak about vertical farming and, I mean, just amazing transformative things, sir, to be able to do more with less and to do less damage and give people more. See that there? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, this is a serious matter, sir. And, you know, I feel as if, sir, that we have an option. And there's going to be a time, sir, where we could choose to do that which we have always been doing. Or we can choose, sir, to take the bull by the horn, sir, and to lead. And it is very clear to me that this government has chosen the latter, sir, and we are determined to lead. And on some of these very challenging, very, very challenging issues. And Mr. Speaker, sir, as I close, sir, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. I believe that adaptation, sir, is going to be the center of everything that we do. I ask Barbadians to bear with us. Sir, we also have to spend more time educating the public, sir, but that we are acting in their interest, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I know, sir, that many people may think, oh, why are you all so concerned about the ocean and so concerned about the sea? Sir, the sea is the giver of life. It really is the giver of life. It is the balance. You know, it is the variable that balances the equation, Mr. Speaker, sir. And without it, sir, none of us would be here. And I am therefore very indebted and thankful to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture for this pesticide amendment in relation to being able to take some of these dangerous chemicals off the ocean, sir. Because it would mean greater fish for the fishermen. It would mean greater sales for the people who are in the market so that they could go home and feed their children, sir. It would mean that our tuna would get a better price when we put it on the international market. And that all these things, sir, are tied because at the end of the day, this is about livelihoods for Barbadians. It is not banning nothing for banning anything's sake. It is about people being able to live in this country, sir. And it is on that basis, sir, that I would choose to associate myself with this bill and give it my fullest support. I'm obliged, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. You know, as I sat and listened to the interventions on this pesticides control amendment bill, I felt that what was emerging was a kind of I can't say band of brothers. I would have to say can't say horsemen, 4 horse people of the climate crisis. Because the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security, the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, the Ministry of Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, and the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment, the 4 of us have the great task, and I would not wish to be in any other company, sir, to carry out this task, of making visible and making real the issues related to the climate crisis and how we as a small island state are going to be able to respond. We find ourselves collaborating, the ministry in which I work, sir, in particular along with the Ministry of Environment and National Beautification, on not just the financing issues, because we have established a climate finance and climate resilience committee that works on these issues, but also, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South just outlined, on what are the messages of advocacy? What is it that we want to say to the international community about how their actions affect us? But importantly, about how our small actions, even though we don't contribute as much as larger countries, but how our small actions also help affect them and benefit them. The reason that we developed the Rooster Reefs idea and project has a lot to do with what those who spoke before me outlined. And is the fact that everything is linked. Every action that we take has a consequence. And while we may do something in the north, eventually you will end up seeing the impacts in the south. Although we may do something in the Scotland district and think that it will end there, eventually it will make its way to the ocean, to the reefs. And this natural capital, these natural assets that we have that are very valuable, we think that because we do not immediately see the value, or because it does not have a dollar sign in front of it yet, because I know the Ministry of Maritime Affairs is working on being able to value that. And it's not just for the sake of doing that. It's to be able to say, well, this is why we have to protect this asset. This is the value of what we are protecting. And so when we come up with these ideas, the Roosteries program, in addressing everything from the security of people's homes and built infrastructure to the protection of the coral reefs, and making sure that we protect that patrimony of the Barbadian people from which we all benefit, from which those who live here benefit and those who come to invest benefit. When we come up with these ideas, it's not just for the sake of doing so. It's not just to sound bright. It is to be able to show that these things are related, that these things have a relationship. So I won't spend too much time, sir, on things that the honourable members before me have discussed, but I do want to say a little bit about the links between the substances that we consume and that we're exposed to, the agriculture sector that we're discussing today, and the health of ourselves and everything around us. The Ministry of Health and Wellness is developing a very bold and very necessary national cancer control plan for Barbados. And it starts to make visible and to provide solutions for one of the things that we know is particularly troubling for those of us who live here. We know that when it comes to the incidences of some cancers, and in particular women's cancers, that there is an important problem that we have to solve. And one of the things that I am very happy to see and to know is that we have Barbadians working abroad, and I don't have permission to call their names, but I think that many of us know who they are, who are looking at not just the treatments that others have developed, but really what are some of the drivers, what are some of the causes, what are some of the things in our environment that make young women in Barbados vulnerable to these types of cancers. And this is the type of original research that is required, that we are a special population. We are a population that is predominantly the descendants of formerly enslaved African people. There are certain things about our genetics, there are certain things about our physiology that, quite frankly, the research in other places does not concern itself with as the first point of call. They may get around to us as a group later if they have the money. But we have to, what was the expression, sir, that is used, drunk or sober, mind your business? We have to mind our business. We have to concern ourselves with the health of and well-being of people who look like us and move like us and talk like us. And so when we start to examine the ways in which pesticides affect the natural environment and affect our own health, I think this has to be part of a broader conversation about how we have to be more than just takers of knowledge from other people. It brings me to look, sir, at the issue of food labeling, the issue of food testing. We import so much of what we eat. And there's something that I noticed some time ago, and the Honourable Member for St. James South will be able to attest to this in her work in the Ministry of Foreign Trade. And it is the fact that there was a time, I see it less often now, where you would see specially labeled goods for export to a particular area. And it would make me wonder, so what is going on with this? And what is in here that is okay for us in the Caribbean to eat, is okay for the African continent to eat, but the people who exported it don't want to eat it? And so when it comes to what we are putting in our supermarkets and in our mini marts and in our corner stores and saying to Barbadians, this is good to eat, we need to concern ourselves with whether it is really good to eat. And just because it comes in packaged up, it doesn't mean that we should not, in terms of food standards, be looking at whether these are really items that our people should be consuming. You know, I don't want to start naming products because then that is going to put some of our business people in a particular position. But I do think that we have to look too at farming practices of these things that we import. I am pescatarian, sir. I eat finfish only and no other creature in the ocean and no other creature on land. But even with that restriction, I still have to be worried and be concerned about what is in the fish that we take from the ocean for the reasons that the Honourable Member for St. Michael South just outlined. Because, you know, energy cannot be destroyed. It just ends up somewhere else in another form. And so we really have to stop. And just because something is in a box or in a package and it's stamped and said made in somewhere and ends up here doesn't mean that we should be consuming it. I would like to see us get to the place where we do standard food testing across major items that Barbadians eat that are imported, so that we can understand how these things are affecting our population. Now, in the intervention from the Honourable Member for St. Philip's South, one of the things that became very much apparent was the tremendous effort of the Ministry of Agriculture to transform that sector. And I think while most Barbadians and most of the honourable members appreciate the importance of that sector, I think the honourable member would agree that I am perhaps, apart from the Honourable Prime Minister, the one who confuses him the most about making sure that we can really maximize the impact of that sector on all the other parts of economic activity. Now, the Ministry of Investment has a job to do in terms of making sure that we can get the best value from our assets and that we can have a real strategy in terms of how we apportion assets to make sure that Barbadians can benefit. When it comes to the use of land, that is, of course, on a small island, one of our greatest assets. I have spoken in this honourable place before about the physical development plan and how key it is as a document. We have a physical development plan from 2017 that we are updating into a 2020 document, and from the first quarter of next year, we'll be taking to the country to have some consultations. And one of the things that I have been emphasizing, is the euphemistic word that I would use, with the honourable member who introduced this bill, is that the agriculture sector has to identify, has to have a strategy for the use of agricultural lands, the relative use of agricultural lands with other kinds of development, because we have to make sure that when it comes to not just the kind of gross food targets in terms of tonnage and so on, but when it comes to the nutrition security of the country, and I say nutrition security because people can eat, but that does not mean that they're nourishing themselves. And so we talk about nutrition security because we want to make sure that people are not just getting a number of calories, but that they're getting calories that nourish their bodies and allow them to be their best selves. I sat with the Honourable Member for St. Philip South as we had to work out, we had to wrestle with the idea of how do we bring that issue of nutrition security to bear in the context of the COVID pandemic. Because one of the things that we knew for sure was that healthy people are best able to withstand the virus. And a big part of that, of people's health profiles, is the kind of foods that they eat. And so I say all this to emphasize the point that the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security and the work that they do is not just about where you farm or how many sheep you grow. It is really central to the way that we live our lives. It is central to how we are able to nourish ourselves. It is central to our livelihoods. It is one of the sectors that can have tremendous multiplier benefits across the economy. And so when I continue to emphasize to the Honourable Member that we need to have a joint strategy across housing, across investment, across renewable energy and agriculture on how we plan the use of land and how we make sure that we get the best value from it, that is one of the reasons why. And speaking of the use of land, sir, I would not be able to retire from my feet today without making reference to a particular tract of land in the constituency of St. Michael, South Central. Now, the area, sir, between Pine Plantation Road and Pine Road, that covers the back of Pine Gardens, the back of the Column Rock, Britain's Hill, Belleville area, that is bound by those areas. It is what we consider one of the assets of the constituency, but also at this time, regrettably, one of the potential hazards. I've had discussions with my honourable colleagues, those for whom this matter would be relevant, to talk about how we can get the best value from that area, because in the interim, there are some risks that are posed to the people who live in that area. When it is dry, it is prone to fire. And because it is a watercourse, it is difficult to traverse. Sometimes it is difficult to access the fire or to access the area that is giving problems. It provides cover to certain individuals who may be seeking such cover for reasons of which we may not be aware. It represents a safety issue, but it also represents a missed opportunity. You know, it is an area, and we had this conversation recently in the discussions on how we finalize the physical development plan, to look at this matter of the use of water courses. Now, there is a general feeling that because something is a water course, you don't touch it. And I understand that we have to preserve the biodiversity. That is important. But if we are really going to make use of limited assets, then we have to settle, and I understand there is a policy in that regard, but we really have to settle and make people help people understand what is possible to be done in that area. I would love to see the area be made available to residents of the area and surrounding communities to be able to farm, to be able to do vertical farming, to be able to be able to apply the kinds of technology that I know the Ministry of Agriculture is working very much on, but to provide farming opportunities to many of the young people in St. Michael and the urban corridor who would not necessarily consider farming and agriculture and agricultural technology and agro-processing something to which they had access before. I know that the people of St. Michael South Central are interested in these kinds of opportunities. That area of land, I believe that we have the opportunity to convert from a potential threat in some cases to a real provider of livelihoods for the people of that constituency. And I am making the plea on behalf of the constituents that this be addressed. I know that we've had lots of rain. It made clearing the area very difficult. I am pleased to see the sunny skies that we have enjoyed recently, and I'm hoping that that encourages the ministries responsible to attack the area and to turn it into something that the constituents can really benefit from. The final thing I want to speak to, sir, in my short intervention is something that perhaps we don't always speak about. But I am happy to see that the Ministry of Agriculture has finished the work, has closed the circle with respect to the facilities that are available to women agricultural workers as they are out in the fields on a day-to-day basis. This was something that was for a long time an outstanding issue. And I think that it seems perhaps like a minor thing, like a minor nuisance, but any issue that has to do with people's dignity can never be minor. And for a long time, we had women agricultural workers who did not have the appropriate facilities, bathroom facilities, changing facilities, the appropriate privacy, to be able to work outdoors without bother and without worry. And I know that the Ministry of Agriculture has made good on promises to address that. I think that the role of women in agriculture and in farming is one that we perhaps do not talk a lot about. But I think that, we talk about transformational leadership and transformational change. I don't know if people have seen the reports on the COVID response in countries that are led by women, but it has, from all reports, been far more successful than in countries led by men. And so what I found, my mother was a small farmer. And even now, with the little container farming that she's doing, the little barrels, she's still a small farmer. My mother had a kitchen garden. It sent us to school. It sent us to extracurricular activities. And the practices that women farmers employ, the innovation that you find when women have to come up with solutions for small-scale farming, because nobody is necessarily paying them any mind in terms of, extension services and so on, because they're small. They're keeping a kitchen garden to feed their families, and in many cases to feed their communities. But a lot of the techniques that they use are some that can address this issue of how do we get rid of these harmful pesticides. My mother used to grow all kinds of things. She used to sell them to the supermarkets. They used to seek her out because her produce was of high quality. It was large. It was without the use of pesticides. And I think that if we allow people, if we listen to people's stories, and if we are able to document the ways in which they're able to do this, that we would be able to learn a lot in terms of how we might be able to decrease the use of pesticides. The last thing I want to say, sir, is that, there's a lot in 2020 that, as we look back, we had to adjust to. I think there are many things that we didn't think that we would be doing. In a lot of ways, we've had to simplify our lives. And I think the issue of food and how we nourish ourselves and how we make fresh food available to all people is important. I've said before that we have somehow internalized the narrative that it is expensive to eat healthy. And I believe that that's not necessarily the case, but that we have to make it easier, more accessible for people to be able to eat well. But I think that, as other members said before me, that we also have to make this a part of the public discourse, to have conversations about not just the food that we eat, but everything that we ingest, everything that we interact with, and how that affects us. I think one of the things that we're realizing is that we flourish and we thrive when we work as communities. And so I think that the issue of being able to get together with groups of people, I don't tend to like the word cooperative, because sometimes people think that it has to be extremely highly structured, when really I grew up in a place where people often rotated what they would plant in the same plot and got the benefits of that activity. So I only wish to say, sir, that the legislation that we're seeing before this House, even some of the smaller amendments, really point out to us that even in the context of this pandemic, the transformational agenda of this administration continues. That we have not taken our eyes off of that commitment that we've made to the people of Barbados to bring everybody along as we work to transform this country. And with those words, sir, I support this amendment bill.
Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise with my colleagues to support this bill because of its tremendous importance to us as a country and to our participation in international activities such as trade in agro products in various parts of the world. And I'm very pleased to have heard my colleagues share so well on the issue of the pesticide management and what it means for the environment, what it means for water, what it means for food security. Indeed, agriculture stretches across many boundaries. It's not only the backyard farming, it's not only the commercial farmer. We're talking about what we're doing in terms of export, and we're talking in terms of our compliance to international conventions. Now, the Honourable Member for St. Philip South will have mentioned some of the conventions that we've signed on to with regard to the management of pesticides. And indeed, in the Division of Foreign Trade, many engagements that we have, many agreements that we have, all have components that pertain to the safe, effective management of chemicals and the use of pesticides and doing sustainable agriculture. And therefore, it comes to the attention of foreign trade to look at what it is Barbados is doing in relation to the management of its agriculture and the management of pesticides. And so I'm extremely pleased to be able to see this here. Even the FAO and the World Health Organization, they're looking at increasing our cooperation in the field of chemical safety. That this now is becoming a very important part on the world stage. Why it is important to us is because of our goals. We have goals pertaining to food security, and as the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central opined, nutritional security, as well as the growth of regional agro production. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, that has taken the attention of the CARICOM heads of government at their 31st Intersessional one of the things that they have had to look at is how are we going to grow this region? How are we going to diversify our economies? And one of the figures that sticks out very much in the statistics when you look at the imports for the region, we import something like $5 billion worth of food products and agricultural produce. And in Barbados, we import 700 million in terms of agricultural products and food products, a significant sum. So we are importing a great deal of what we consume. And the CARICOM governments recognized that there was a need to address this and therefore establish a program by which they were going to seek to cut $1.25 billion from our food bill so that we can reduce by 25% our imports by 2025. That's the 25 in 25 program. And to achieve this, the revolution, the transformation, the change in agriculture is fundamental to that. And therefore, as the Honourable Member for St. Philip South outlined, the various strategies and initiatives that are being done at every level in agriculture, it helps us to understand the importance of the pesticide management in relation to achieving that overall goal. And why is that? In order for us to export to European Union, to Africa, to CARICOM, one of the things that we have to meet are sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, standards. So even down to the pesticides that you use, the goods are tested to see if they meet the international standards. So the only way that we can, as a region, or Barbados as a nation, can participate in a program of agricultural production is for us to be able to meet the standards that have been required of us. But what is the fallacy behind that, Mr. Speaker? That while international agencies are asking of us those requirements, it has been stated by the FAO that close to $1 billion in unsafe pesticides and chemicals are sold to developing countries annually. That while others are busy protecting their own citizens, their own economies, they are shipping to our countries chemicals, etc., that are unsafe. And therefore, when we say that we are in a battle and a fight, that we have to guard our own business, that no one out there is looking out for you, that unless these nations have governments who have vision, who have guts, because you need guts along with governance, because you have to be able to stand up and say no. And I'm happy to report that this Barbados Labour Party administration, whenever it's had to get up and say no, it has done so. We've carried the fight in many an international organization to be able to preserve what is best for Barbadians. So, on the one hand, you have the requirements you have to meet, but on the other hand, you have a situation where you are importing pesticides that are not in our best interest. And that is why having pesticide management is important. Not only the regulations, but the enforcement of the regulations. But it also calls for vigilance at the border. And this is where our customs and Ministry of Agriculture are important in ensuring that certain things do not come in and do not get distributed any part of the country if we are to do proper pesticide management. But it's not only in relation to the customs, etc., but you also have between the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, one of the co-head committees, subcommittees that have been set up is for foreign trade to work with the Ministry of Health in looking at the whole issue of food, looking at the issue of labeling, looking at the issue of the chemicals that are found in those foods, identifying the things that are injurious to Barbadian health, and making sure that we use our trade policy tools to help us identify and keep out that which will not be to the Barbadians' best health, to ensure that we are able to protect our population. So the other side of that coin, if you're going to defend against imports, then we have to grow what is necessary to be able to give us the food security and create a good supply. And one of the passions I have for this area, Mr. Speaker, is I believe that as the Ministry of Agriculture keeps building out our agricultural production, and especially around products that are natural in the Caribbean, I believe that one of the things we need to do is to trigger the food technologists to be able to take those basic agricultural products and create from it healthy foods, new nutritious foods that we can package and that we can manufacture and that we can export, because we have to take advantage of the new wave that is going across the world where everyone is looking at health and looking at what they are ingesting. And I believe that where the Honourable Member for St. Philip South is taking agriculture is actually positioning the country to be able to look at what are some of the possibilities for healthy eating, where we could develop a new line of snacks for our children so that they're not consuming corn kernels and consuming a whole lot of other things that are not good for them, and that we can get into a market that is breaking out in a new way. Mind you, there'll always be those, Mr. Speaker, who will enjoy their pizza unless they put something really healthy on it. So Barbados then has a tremendous opportunity in which it can engage in the production of products that can be marketed across the world that meet all the necessary standards, and making sure that we use our pesticides effectively and use organic approaches. All of these will assist us in being able to achieve this. Now, if we are going to succeed, one of the things then is that there has to be a disciplined approach in the country with regards to compliance to new standards. From every ministry, and I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, that you would have heard a number of ministers sharing over the months about the various initiatives that we are pursuing. Along with every initiative, you're hearing standards that are being required in that particular industry. And what this means is that Barbadians must change how they operate in relation to that particular issue. It means enterprises have to change how they conduct themselves in the space so that they're able to meet standards. So what is going to be necessary is for us to build a Barbados in which a disciplined approach to our lives and the management of the element of our lives becomes central to what we do. And this means a disciplined approach to farming. I believe that if we can successfully help our farmers to transition to new techniques, to use proper methods for the care and management of their farms, the irrigation, taking control of pests, etc., that we can build world-class farmers here in Barbados. I believe that if we can achieve that, we can have safe food, safe water. And I believe that this will create the foundation that we need in order to participate in regional agro-production. Now, to be successful, it means that there are 3 levels at which the community has to operate. First, you have the responsibility of government. And this is what we are honoring today. This is what we are complying with today. That government has to be able to bring the necessary legislation, but not just enough to do the legislation. It is the enforcement of the legislation now that is going to be important, so that we are able to state firmly and with confidence that Barbados meets the international standards in relation to how it does its pesticide management, and that they can vouch for the quality of the food which they offer. It also means that you must have pesticide registration. It means you have to exercise control over the actual sale. And you would have heard that the Honourable Member for St. Philip's South talk about the need to get a license in order to be able to use a particular chemical. Along with government, industry now is important. And here in the Caribbean, we have not yet developed, none that I know of, we have not yet developed enterprises that really look at the development of pesticide control substances or approaches. And perhaps that might be an opportunity for us to be able to investigate and research better ways of the management of pesticides and to be able to take something to the world in terms of turning out enterprises that can offer these as products or services to the farming community in CARICOM and further abroad. Internationally, there is a lot of assistance for countries who are seeking to transform their agriculture. Indeed, in the post-Cotonou agreement that will soon be signed between the European Union and the CARIFORUM countries, one of the areas that comes up for consideration in the agreement is the issue of smart, sustainable agriculture. And what we've noted in international organizations is that they're seeking to assist various countries in being able to establish the analytical laboratories which we need to be able to do the necessary investigation. That is one of the shortcomings that Barbados has suffered from for many years and has limited our ability to be able to trade with Martinique or Guadeloupe or Suriname because we've not had the lab services to be able to test our product and therefore vouch for its quality. But I can assure the country that the Minister of Agriculture, the Honourable Member for St. Philip's South, has that well in hand. And so, Mr. Speaker, if we can be successful in the effective use of the pesticides, if we can be successful in being able to develop the sanitary and phytosanitary legislation, if we are successful in being able to get laboratory services, the success of the Honourable Member for St. Philip's South in achieving these things will help to drive the success of Barbados for a very long time into the future. And he would have left a powerful legacy for us as a nation and for the security of our people. Because if we can succeed in this, Barbados will be able to get involved in a regional production program. And this has been very important, and the heads of government have been driving this particular process. They have created the formation of the CARICOM Private Sector Association, which brings together the private sector from across the region, and they have tasked them with the 25 in 25 program to be able to reduce our import bill in the region by at least $450 million and move it gradually until we're able to get to our desired goal. And this is something I look forward to. I'm also equally pleased to share that we've had the formation of the CARICOM Manufacturers Association, where a number of manufacturing associations around the region have come together to form a regional body so that they too can look at how they can move forward in terms of production. And one of the things that they will be seeking to cash in on will be the manufacturing of agro products. Now, I know in Barbados, we often say that our private sector tends to be laid back, tends not to step forward, tends to avoid risk. But one of the things that I have been seeing over these past 2.5 years is that we have a number of businesses who are now stepping forward, thinking outside of the box, stepping out and doing new things. And so we have a number of them that are seeking to get involved in the agro production area. And so I'm looking forward to Barbados having more products, a diversity of products to be able to bring to the market. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to end by congratulating the Honourable Member and also to share, to also congratulate the other ministries that work assiduously together to help us advance the benefits for Barbados in terms of what we're going to do in the transformation of our economy. And many times I've heard, Mr. Speaker, people don't seem to hear when we speak, and this is unfortunate. I wish more people would listen to Parliament. But so often you hear people saying there's nothing happening in agriculture, we don't have an agricultural plan, and I'm wondering, where are they? What are they listening to? Because we're constantly announcing what we are doing and what people can look forward to. And I'm so pleased that the initiative which the Honourable Member for St. Philip South has started has not only galvanized the commercial farmers of Barbados, but has also galvanized the regular citizen. Between COVID and the Ministry of Agriculture, there's been such a tremendous interest in everybody looking to grow something. Even in a constituency as urban as St. James South, there has been an explosion of people who formerly did not have time to grow anything, who are now engaging in growing things in their backyard. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the Ministry of Agriculture being able to assist them by helping them to know the best ways in which to manage pesticides and the best ways in which to manage their crops so that they will have success in producing wholesome food that they can put on their tables. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share and to thank the Honourable Member for bringing to this House the issue of pesticides management, giving us the opportunity to take control and to improve our health by making sure that we do not use harmful substances in the management of our agricultural production. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Philip South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to start by thanking all of my colleagues for the contribution they've made in support of this bill, and to say that I'm extremely pleased to know that we have recognized the work that is being done in the Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security. I'm sure the team at the ministry would be happy to note the tremendous support that they are getting from my colleagues as far as we move towards our transformational program and to bring agriculture into the 21st century. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West asked a few questions which I would seek to address. Impact on coastal and marine environment, that was handled very eruditely by the member for St. Michael South. Equally, whether pesticides go into water reserve, collaboration between the ministries, implications for fisheries, protocols for prescription for use of chemicals, all were addressed very eruditely by the Honourable Member for St. Michael South. He did, however, ask about the situation on farmlands with the use of pesticides, and I am happy to report that there is a health and safety committee at the BAMC that deals specifically with these things. People who work in the fields dealing with pesticides or chemicals are given the appropriate gear to wear. And this is part of a review process that takes place where they must comply. So the BAMC is compliant. Sir, I have a document that clearly outlines, and I can make this a document of the House, because it is important that I cover some of the things that are captured here. The BAMC undertakes to comply and to act in conformity with all the statutory health and safety requirements and the International Labour Organization, ILO, Convention C-155 and C-184, Minister. And so therefore, the BAMC is compliant, and there are people who are working using pesticides or harmful chemicals are given the appropriate gear. The document goes on to address
Honourable, document is from where? What document is it?
This is a document from the General Safety and Health Policy Statement from the BAMC. So I can make this a document of your house, Mr. Speaker. That, I believe, should address the concerns that were raised by the honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like also to mention that in terms of testing, we have had conversation, as I mentioned before, at Cabinet, to deal with the strengthening of Barbados's national agriculture, health, and food control systems. And once the unit is established and we have the resources, Barbados also will be in a position to do its own testing through our sanitary and phytosanitary protocols. And these measures, a lot of work really has already been done. There are standards, manuals, and everything that are in place, but it's for us to continue that work, and we therefore need to present an entire budget for all this to Cabinet and then take this forward. It would mean legislative changes taking place as well, and we are pretty much on course to having this done. The honourable member for St. Michael South Central made some very important points, and I'm particularly pleased to note her interest in the development of agriculture and the transformational work that we are doing at the ministry. She mentioned food labeling and testing, and truth be told, once we have the SPS standards in place, SPS measures and protocols in place, all these things would form naturally into what will take place under those protocols. Mr. Speaker, the agriculture land use policy as well. This is a work in progress. I am acutely aware of a meeting that was held between the two ministries, and we will make sure that we are in a position to determine certainly the amount of land that should be retained for agriculture and what can be used otherwise for development and investment. So, Mr. Speaker, with that being said, I believe that we have captured pretty much all that was needed, and I now beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
A second time, honourable member.
Second time, Mr. Speaker.
Question is that this bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair to allow for this bill to be considered in committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
I'd like to move that clause 1 do stand part.
Question is that clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 2 do stand part.
Question is that clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 3 do stand part.
Question is that clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 4 do stand part.
Question is that clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report the passing of one bill in committee. To His Honor the Speaker.
Seconder. Question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill be read a third time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I do beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as one bill, the Pesticides Control Amendment Bill 2020. Act 2020.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. Number 5.
Order number 5, sir. Order number 5, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of the resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in the Barbados Tourism Investment, Inc., a company incorporated under the Companies Act. Act, Chapter 308, of the parcel of land, the property of the Crown, situate at Bay Street in the parish of St. Michael, in this island, more particularly described in the schedule to this resolution, for the public purpose of tourism development.
Honourable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I don't intend to delay the House very long on this matter. This is a very small parcel of land, 24.5 square meters, approximately 240 square feet, the equivalent of less than 2 car park spaces. Essentially, when this land was first vested in BTII, subsequent to that, when a further survey was done, it was found that a little bit more of beach land had in fact accreted. And that accretion of land is what we are now requiring to be vested in BTII, so that we can complete this, this legal matter of this vesting and then the sale of the land to the interested party, so that we can get on with the construction of the tourism investment that's being there. So when this was first done, on May 28th, when the House approved the resolution, it was 69 square meters of land at Browns Beach, Bay Street, Michael. But what has happened is subsequent to that, when a further survey was done, it was found to have increased to now 93.5 square meters because of the amount of accretion that we're seeing there on that land, which is the area that is between two parcels of land, which was a drain. And when I think of that drain, you know, Mr. Speaker, many years ago, that land, that sea actually used to come up almost to the back of the buildings. I remember as a boy going just behind those buildings, and the sea actually used to come up all the way to almost hitting the walls. And to see how so much beach has how much sand and beach has accreted there now, made it almost one of the best beaches in Barbados. Very popular amongst locals and visitors alike. And it forms part of what I call the Platinum Horseshoe as it moves around Carlisle Bay. So this is a small vesting of 240 odd square feet so that we can tidy up this transfer over to BTII and get going with the development in the area. So I'd ask that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 3:45 p.m.
Seconder, please. The question is that this honourable chamber be suspended until 3:45 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 3:45 p.m.